Welcome to Book Huddle and Middle Grade Matters podcast. Today, Shannon Balloon and I are teaming up to talk about our favorite books of the year so far. So, Shannon, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. If you're listening on Book Huddle, you definitely need to check out the Middle Grade Matters podcast. Shannon, tell us about you.
Well, thank you, Karen, so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talking about my favorite thing, which are middle grade books. I host the Middle Grade Matters podcast. It is a weekly podcast that's available everywhere. And on that podcast, the primary thing I do is I interview authors. So I read their books, I hand select them, I reach out to them, or maybe they've reached out to me, but somehow we connect. And then we record an interview, and it's so wonderful to hear from the authors from the perspective of how they came up with their books, their inspiration. And then we talk a lot about their writing journey and how they became an author and what that looked like. And then they give wonderful advice as well for other writers like myself. So that's the other
Yes.
thing I do connected to this is I do write middle grade books. I have an agent. I am working on the next step, which is hopefully finding an editor
Yay!
for a book. Yeah, it's actually really hard. You think you get that agent and you're
Gosh,
just like going to coast, and
right?
it's actually not the case. So,
Oh,
but I love writing. I will do it no matter what happens or doesn't happen on
right.
the
It's such a
publication
joy.
side. It really is. It really is. So I'm just so delighted to be talking to you, Karen. And for my listeners, because I'm planning to run this same interview on the Middle Grade Matters podcast, Karen, can you introduce yourself to my listeners and tell them about your podcast, Book Huddle?
Yes. So my name's Karen Reeder, spelled with EEs actually. And people always ask me if that's my real name. I'm like, yeah, I would have spelled it right.
I,
And
I get the same thing, with balloon.
yeah,
Like
it's
they're
just a
like
cute name, right?
balloon are and they'll be afraid to pronounce it and like
It should
offend
sound
me.
weird.
And I'm like, no, 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 it's balloon,
It,
just
it
like a
is.
balloon.
It is. Right.
Yeah, okay, go on. Sorry.
No, we're great. We're great. So I've always loved children's books. Right after I got married and my mother-in-law was asking my husband what to get me for a graduation gift, he was like, "Ah, get her some picture books." She's like, "Really?" And I just been obsessed with them. I taught sixth grade, and when a few years ago, 2020, I started Readgab, my YouTube channel to recommend children's books because I just love so much, and I felt like I was always running into people in the bookstore that didn't know what to look for, and they were really bothered that their children did not read enough quality literature. And so also my goal has been to be like, do you know what? Graphic novels are still quality. Let's have the joy of reading. So that has been my
Yes.
goal with my channel, and then my podcast has helped spreading this joy of reading. So I interview authors as well on Book Huddle,
Mhm.
and we talk about similar, like what inspired the book, why you created the book, but then also, one of the things that I like to talk about is themes within the book. So that can sprout conversations for parents because parents, teachers, librarians, as they're listening, sometimes it's hard to find the themes, and sometimes parents are not that interested in reading middle grade, which I wish they were. But if you don't have time to read the book, if you knew some themes and what it was about, it can help foster conversation with the kids. And so those are some of the things that we like to dive into because, of course, always first and foremost, the joy of reading. But then what else, if we can manage some conversation, what else could we talk about?
Yeah, that's
Uh,
great.
so we both read lots of middle grade. So we're just going to take turns. Similar
Mhm.
to a video I did with Kopy Sharp at the end of 2024, we're going to do it so far in the year. This will
Yeah.
post at the end of June. So we're going to just talk about our favorite books so far. And we were talking about before that I love fantasy so much. So I probably will
Mhm.
be heavy on that. And Shannon said, that's just fine. So,
Yeah, the fantasy that I've read, I've always loved it, but
right.
it's just not my go-to typically. So for me, it's more contemporary. I love historical.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so it's great that we actually have those different natural inclinations. So our
Yes.
lists are probably going to end up being quite different, or at least I'm hoping so. So,
Yes. So my first one came out in January. It is called Inkbound, Meticulous Jones and the Skull Tattoo. It is this incredibly imaginative magic system that revolves around ink. And so in these cities that are magical, they have ink that flows through the foundation of the city, and ink powers the magic. And I thought that was so neat because, like being into writing and stuff, the ink of it, but the ink also has another purpose in that everybody at a certain age, I want to say it's around age 11, they get a tattoo on their hand that helps determine what they're meant to do in life. And so, like her dad has a ship, and so he's a captain of a ship. And so there's like dictionaries that say what the different tattoos mean so that you know what you're meant to do. And some of them have multiple meanings, but she gets a skull tattoo and she is just devastated because, oh my gosh, in the dictionary, it means she's going to be a murderer. And so she's always worried about, who am I going to murder? Is it going to be an accident? And the book is just beautiful, talking about being in charge of your own destiny. Like, are things really chosen for you? Or are you in charge of your own destiny? And I had Philippa on the podcast as well, and we talk about just, yeah, making choices yourself and what determines who you are and your future.
Yeah, that sounds great. I really like hearing about these other books that I don't know about. So this is so fun. Um, I had a really hard time selecting
It
books.
is
I
so hard.
know, well, the majority of the middle grade books I read are ones connected to my podcast,
Yes.
and I love them all because I've hand selected them all. And so when it came for me to select my books, I felt like I was going to go with not just ones that were ones I really like that I remembered that really resonated with me, but also I wanted to kind of bring in a variety.
Yes.
So my first book is called The Secret of Honeycake.
I
And
haven't read it. Okay, cool.
this is the sweetest book. It is about a very quiet girl who likes to write in journals. Her name is Hurricane,
Oh.
and she comes to live with her very, very loud aunt. So they're like oil and water. And it's a very unlikely pairing. But as time goes on, you know, they develop a bond, and
Mhm.
in the end, what they really need each other. And so seeing that happen is so heartwarming. This book, I also love this book because it's got very, very short chapters. I also think
Yay.
that this is appropriate for younger middle grade readers, and it also would be an incredible read aloud. So if
Nice.
teachers are looking for a great read aloud for their classes for middle grade, for a younger middle grade class, especially, this is a great book. It
Lovely.
has lots of animals in it, which I think is
Yay.
really fun. Kids love to hear about animals. There's a dog, there's a cat, there's an injured bird. There's also a really, really kind butler. And so the butler really helps these two different individuals sort of understand each other.
Right.
So it's has so much heart. It's one of those books that while I may not remember the details of it forever, I will always remember how I felt when I was
Right.
reading it. So that's my first.
Yes. I just recently, Ben Gooderson recommended The Thief Lord, and I was like, did. I don't remember why. Like, I don't remember. I didn't, when we were talking, I didn't remember anything that it was about, but I remembered loving it and the way it made me feel. And
Mhm.
so that's so
Exactly.
powerful when a book just makes you feel
Exactly.
good things.
Exactly. And you never forget that feeling.
Yes.
So I often recommend books to people and I say, this is a great book. I don't remember why, but I know that I
Yes.
loved it.
Yes,
You know?
right? And that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what's so important is, how did it make you feel? Because
Exactly.
kids
Yeah.
need that. They need these good feelings too. And
For
that's the beauty
sure.
of middle grade. It's these
Mhm.
emotions felt, these good things.
Yeah.
So my next one is Max in the Land of Lies. Have
Uh-huh.
you read that one,
I've
or Max
heard
in the
of it.
House
I
of
have not
Spies?
read of it, but I have heard
Oh,
of it. Yes.
so good. So just recently, Margaret Peterson Haddix posted on her thing. She was like, if I could make everybody in the country, every adult read it, I would. And I was like, yes,
Yeah.
because it is so fantastic. And this second book really goes into why Germany kind of became what they became during World War II, and why
Okay.
people followed Adolf Hitler. And so, and I love it because I think so many people get hesitant to do something like this where they explain the other side because they worry that it feels like justifying. But
Hmm.
explaining is not exculpating, and it's just it's beautiful.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
he goes and he is behind enemy lines and he's pretending to be, Hitler Youth. And
Mhm.
he has to really get in the trenches of this. But then as he's bonding with these different individuals or making connections with some of them and seeing their sides, it is so powerful to
Mhm.
see how somebody can be misled and go down a path. And especially because of propaganda, it's so much about propaganda.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful. It actually reminds me of, Danielle Clayton's work, which hers is not really so much in real history, because that's her big thing. It's just like, it's just a story. It's just a story about
Mhm.
fantastical people and places, but it has so much application of the harm of propaganda and what it can
Yeah.
cause when we just
Yeah.
read a news story or watch something and immediately believe it.
Yeah. Is the author Adam Gidwitz,
Gidwitz, yep.
correct? Yeah,
Yep.
see, I know the book. I've heard about it. People have mentioned it to me. It's one of those books that I'm like, I need to find that book. I need to read that book because I've
Yes.
heard such incredible things about not only that book, but his other writing.
Yes.
So,
And
yes.
it's very light fantasy as well. It's a little genre smash that it's historical
Mhm.
fiction. That's the big, big thing. It is big
Mhm.
on historical fiction,
Mhm.
but then it has just a light amount of fantasy that he has these two mythical creatures that live on his shoulders that only he can see and interact with. And they provide a lot of the comic relief in the book.
Wow. And I love historical fiction. So
Yes.
another reason I need to read that book.
Oh,
So
it's fantastic. Just
thank you.
the
Thank you for
storyline is so there. And I think this is hard to balance when you've got just a big, captivating storyline, but this just incredible learning experience through reading it.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. So my next book is called Candle Island.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yes, that would have been on my list. So I'm glad you're recommending it because that gives me more opportunities to pick other ones. So
So
good.
Lauren Wolk is the author of this book, and I have loved Lauren's books since the very beginning. I think Wolf Hollow was her first book, and she's won so many awards for all of her books. And she's an auto buy for me. So any book that she writes, I buy it, I read it, I love it. So I was so excited when I saw she had a book coming out this year, and I immediately, reached out and said, I would love to interview you because I'm a fan, I'm fangirling over her.
Yes,
So
right.
I got to do that, and it was amazing. And this book is so beautiful. It is about a girl named Lucretia, and she and her mother come to a tiny island, Candle Island in Maine. So her father was killed in a car accident, and her mother is a very famous but reclusive artist. She is always trying to sort of escape the spotlight. And so this tiny island is the perfect place to do that, obviously.
Yes.
Yes, and this book just it weaves together art
Mm,
and music and friendship, and ultimately it's a story about kids being true to themselves and finding out who they are and learning to be willing to share that with others. And it's hard to put yourself out there for
right.
kids, for adults, for everyone when you have a talent. And so I loved that aspect of the book. Also, the island is so vivid.
Yes.
Lauren's descriptions of this, you just know you're there. And she actually lives in a place like this. And
Right.
so it's so authentic. It's so just I love a good setting. I just love
Right.
a good
Oh, it is
um
perfect.
yeah, and there's a secret, by the way, at the heart of it all, which I won't give away, of course. But when it happens and you figure it out, you're like, I didn't see that coming. And it's
Yes.
really exciting. So
It's,
love
oh,
Candle Island.
it's beautiful. And here's a plug for both podcasts right now. If you already listened to one of them, we both interviewed Lauren Wolk,
Okay.
and I listened to Shannon's interview and I loved it. And we both have different takes, and different
Mhm.
questions that we ask. And so you get different things even when we both end up having the same authors on for an interview.
Absolutely. And I do think it's funny when we do have the same one on it. I don't think it happens that often,
No, it's
but
occasionally. Yeah.
I listen to yours as well. And, I just feel like I'm so glad that you also have a podcast and you also do middle grade because I have to turn down so many potential books,
Yes.
ones even that I know I would love.
Right.
And I just can't. I'm one person. Like I feel like we could have five people interviewing
Yes.
middle grade authors, and we still wouldn't cover all the ones that we may love or that are just renowned or whatever. So
Yes.
anyway, yeah. feel
So
the same way.
beautiful. Love it. All right. Let's do Right Back at You by Carolyn Mackler. And this is so much fun because it's written in letters, and I love a good story written in letters. It makes it just quick to read. I actually listen to the audio, and
Mhm.
it makes it go really quick because there's two different narrators, right, for the different letters, but it's more unique than letters. So this boy gets told by his therapist to write a letter to anyone. He doesn't have to send it, just to write a letter. So he writes the letter to Albert Einstein, but then he takes the letter and puts it in his closet. And later, when he goes back to get it, it's gone and there's a letter to him. And so these letters are being written back and forth, and it's through time. I think it's like 38 years is the time travel that these letters go through, but it's also distance. It's about 400 miles of distance, that it's this weird little time loop, wormhole thing going on.
Mhm.
And at first, the kids are like freaked out. Like, that's this girl in the past and this boy in the present, or this girl in the present and this boy in the future. And they're both like, how are you getting in my closet? Get out of here, freaking weirdo. But eventually they accept what's happening, and they become really good friends, and they support each other through what they're going through and what's hard for them. And like the girl's being bullied for being Jewish and what she's going through. And he's like, certain things like this would not happen. And then they're explaining things that they use. He's like, you get on the phone to find out what the weather's going to be like. You call a number, and she's like, what's the Google? You keep saying you'll ask the Google. And so they're back and forth, just learning about each other's current time periods, and a
Mhm.
powerful story of friendship and letter writing. And Carolyn has this awesome thing. I think it's with Scholastic that they've partnered on. Anyways, this really awesome thing that she's got going. It's the Right Back at You project,
Mhm.
where they work together, that they get a couple schools. So if a school's interested in doing this, you're paired with another school that's far away from you. And the kids experience reading the book through read aloud or whatever. And then they write letters to a pen pal at that school over a distance. And so really,
That's
really neat book.
amazing. What a great opportunity for teachers, for students to have that, to actually take that story and then live that story in a certain
Yes.
way. It would make the experience so much more real. And I
Right.
love that. I just think that's great. I also love novels that come in different formats. Like you mentioned, the letter writing. I think it's called an epistolary novel. I think
Yes.
that's the fancy name. And it's interesting because it leads into my next book,
Yay.
which is, you find it, Away
And I
by
haven't
Megan
read it, and I've
Freeman.
meant to. And it has is
Mhm.
it a companion or is it a sequel?
So Megan Freeman wrote
Mm,
Alone,
mm.
which was a New York Times bestseller.
Yes. Yes.
It was phenomenal. Although I have to tell you, I had not read it yet when this came out. It had been
Okay.
one of those books that I always wanted to read, just never got to it.
Right, right.
Um,
Same.
yeah, because I'd heard such good things about it. So it's one of those ones I know I'm going to read it. I just hadn't got to. It's in that stack of TBRs.
Yes.
So Away comes out, and I read this book first, even
Oh.
though it is a companion to Alone, but I
And it
had
can stand on
seen
its own
it
without
can.
having read
It
alone.
can. So
Perfect.
the way it works is Alone is a book about a girl who's left behind when there is this incident that happens in her area of Colorado, and there's this mass evacuation, and the
Okay.
entire town is evacuated to these camps, and she gets left behind. And so she's on her own, she's trying to survive. It's so interesting to see, what it's like for middle grade aged child to be on her own. And it's a great story. But again, I read this one first. This one is on the same timeline
Okay.
as Alone, but this is the story of the people who were evacuated. So
Ah,
this is
neat.
set in a camp where it's about four kids. They're all in the same camp, and they become basically like investigators to find out more about this mass incident because they're starting to wonder what's really happening. Why
Right.
why exactly are we here?
What
They're
caused
not
it?
getting a lot of information from the government. This is very dystopian, I think is what it's
Right.
called.
I love
Like
dystopian.
it's
Goes
great.
right
It's
in my
great.
gem.
It's so fun. It's so fun. But the formatting is what I think was really neat. It is written in four different types of ways. There's
Wow.
prose, there's verse, there's news reports, because one of the kids like is an aspiring like
Nice.
documentarian. He's doing like scripts and stuff. And then there's one is wants to be a, you know, a journalist. And so she's writing her stories through news reports. There's also letters.
Neat.
Someone writes letters to their aunt. And so it's really neat to see it jump from chapter to chapter and get to see it told through so many different formats. I just think that's really clever. Um, and this just, you know, I don't want to give it away, but they're trying to uncover what really happened with this imminent threat. And, you know, it's neat when the kids are the ones who are stepping up and really
Yes.
going after this information.
Because
Um,
kids are bothered when they see something wrong that's going on with injustices. Like when I
yeah,
taught sixth grade and would be teaching about something that happened in history, they're like, how could that happen? That is so wrong.
yeah,
I like that kids are bothered and they want to
yes.
do something.
Yes. In fact, the character in this book who wants to be the journalist,
Yes.
she makes lots of references to the muckrakers who uncovered a lot of corruption in government
Um,
years and years ago. And so she's very inspired by them. And she's basically trying to do this the other thing, the same thing. Like, you know, is this real or are we being duped here? You
right.
know? And so it's really neat because so you also draw on that little bit of history of the muckrakers and the role that they played in American history. So
Oh, awesome.
highly
Awesome.
highly recommend.
I haven't
Highly recommend.
even, so muckrakers, that's a real thing.
Yes. Well, that was the term that was given to the journalists back in, oh, I feel like it was 1930s, 40s, but don't
Okay.
quote me on that.
Well, and
Um,
I haven't heard of it. So
yeah,
that's good for
yeah,
me. I
yeah.
love the different things in history that we're able to learn, even when it's not strictly historical fiction, but these things that we can pull
Yes.
out and learn through
Yes.
these books.
I think it was Ada Calhoun. Oh God, I hope I've had those
Oh,
names
okay,
right.
that
I
name
could be
sounds right.
wrong. Does that sound right? Yeah,
That
just uncovering a lot of bad things that were happening and
okay.
exposing things from an
Yes.
investigative journalist standpoint. She's just very inspired by that. And so I think it's neat that kids are taking this kind of initiative,
All right, cool.
especially under such unusual circumstances,
Right.
which are
Right.
just make the whole thing just very, it's just crackling with, you know,
Ooh,
uh, mystery and it's intense and they don't know when they're going to get to go home. And, you know, all of that is playing along in the background. So
ooh, I wonder if it's got audio because that's how I read so many
mhm,
advanced reader copies
it
that's how I
does.
use. Okay,
In
perfect.
fact, I listened to
Oh, you
it.
did. Good.
Yes, yes, yes.
And
So
it's
I
a good
received a
audio.
copy and I'm playing, you know, I love having the copy because then I can see the formatting. But I
Yes.
actually listened to it on audio and there were multiple narrators.
Neat.
And
Okay.
so it was incredible. It was an incredible audio performance.
Perfect. Okay. Then I'm going to go add it into my slot to go for an audio because I've been meaning to get to that book and
Yeah,
I just haven't.
yeah.
So one that I recently listened to as well that is one of my favorites that and sometimes you need the book too because there's illustrations or just to see how it is or
Mhm.
just how the word is written. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I
Yes,
didn't even know because I've been hearing it. I had no idea how it was written.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
The Undead Fox of Deadwood Forest by Aubrey Hartman is so good. And
Mhm.
the double meanings are so powerful in the messages, but just like enjoy the first read and get lost in the story. And then
Mhm.
I know I'm going to go back and reread and just see so many things. And I had had multiple people telling me that and recommending it. So I was like, okay, I need to get on this. And so I listened to it. And then as soon as I finished listening to it, I bought the hard copy, which I can't buy every copy of everything that I listen to or read advanced reader copies. I just couldn't afford
Right.
them. But there are certain ones that you just need to own on your shelf. And this is one of them. It is just incredible. So among animals in this Deadwood forest, there's a spiritual transition that you go through the forest and there's a guide who ferries them on doesn't really ferry them he tells them helps them decide which afterlife to go to and there's four afterlives: peace, pleasure, progress, and pain. And so they show up at this fox's house and he helps send them on where they're supposed to go and helps them decide that if they don't already know right away, because some of them have a harder time figuring out where to go. And it goes into the fox Claire's backstory and why he ended up being a guide. And then also there's this other character that is just so fantastic. Her name is Ginger Snipes, and their interactions are just so fantastic and endearing, but it he's trying to figure out why Ginger Snipes won't move on. He sends her to a particular one and she shows up back at his door. And so they have this just incredible adventure with just so much deeper meaning. But the message is not like you never want to get lost in a message, right? Because it's just a put down in a book that it's just like, oh my gosh, there's
Mhm.
too much message going on. No, like the story is just so fun, but as you're like thinking about it, you're like, oh my gosh, like think about all these other meanings that you could talk about. It's got so many, but the writing is just beautiful. The emotions felt. Yes, I cried. And I love it so much. Just like we
Mm.
were talking about the way a book makes you feel. It is just one of the best that will always be one of the best for me.
I love that. What's the title again?
So it's kind of long, and I talked to Aubrey about this in the interview, which this interview will post after the one that we're currently recording.
Uh-huh.
The Aubrey's interview will go up in July sometime. But she talks about that, yeah, she has these long, wordy titles, but she
Mhm.
just gets so attached to them that she's like, I've got to, I can't even remember the other one, the Lion of something Manor, something, something. But she's just like, yes, like sometimes my editor's like, let's kind of work on a different title. And she just loves them. So it's The Undead Fox of
Mhm.
Deadwood Forest,
Okay.
because Claire as a guide is not dead, but not alive. So
Mhm.
Claire's undead. And then it's Deadwood Forest is where it takes place, where the souls choose where they're going to go on to.
Sounds very cool. I
It
have to
is
say.
so awesome. And even if you're not like, if fantasy's not your jam, it's okay.
Mhm.
And if
Okay.
like talking creatures are not your jam, you should just try this book anyways, everybody, because this is one of those that like Colby Sharp recommends it, and he's not big into fantasy,
Yes.
but it is just so, so good.
Okay. I'm adding that to my list. Absolutely. It sounds great.
It's just one of the best there is. Like we said about emotions, it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Cool. Well, my next book, because I wanted to bring in sort of some different types of books,
Right?
um, is a series. And it's been out for a while, but the latest book just came out.
Okay.
So I feel like it qualifies. But if you have not read the Theodora Hendrix series, this
Okay.
Jordan Kopy is the author. I did interview her. And the reason I love these books is because first of all, they're spooky, but they're not too scary. They're like
Okay.
fun, spooky.
Middle grade spooky is
And
where it's at.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And short chapters again.
Hmm.
And the most wonderful, I gotta flip through one, illustrations.
Oh,
And
fun.
so it makes for a wonderful book for either a younger middle grade reader. I mean, any middle grade reader, but it would definitely work for your younger ones. And it
Yes.
also, again, would be a great read aloud.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
it's quirky. So what it's about is a girl who is determined to protect her monster foster family. So she's a
Yes.
human and she gets adopted by these monsters. And she wants to make sure that they stay hidden from other humans because
Cool.
that's their goal as well. And there's all these spooky creatures, there's monsters, but again, they're fun. They're not, this is not horror. This is like
Right.
little spooky, little spooky. And the writing is so clever. It's just a delight. And it's described actually by the publisher as the Addams Family meets Nancy Drew.
Oh, cute.
So who doesn't want to read a book that,
Yes. Nancy
combines
Drew is what
those
got me
thoughts?
into reading as a child.
Yeah, I loved her. I read all of hers. So
Yes.
yes, same.
Oh, that's fantastic. I will definitely have to check that one out. Oh, it's so hard to choose. Like so many of these that I've read, it is so hard to pick. So sometimes what you say inspires me. So thinking of images in a book, Afia
Mhm.
in the Land of Wonders is incredible. These illustrations, oh my goodness, are just amazing. And some of them are fully on into having color in them, and some of them are more just sketches and then in between. Just
Mhm.
beautiful illustrations throughout. So it's a little retelling of Alice in Wonderland,
Mhm.
but in like an African perspective. And so, oh, it's just gorgeous. So this girl grows up in a very sheltered society, and she is a twin, and she's about to go through a rite of passage with her twin to, I think, becoming an adult. But she's kind of nervous about this, and she's very curious about the outside world. And so she meets a character who is trying to entice her to come into this outside world. And her sister's like, no, no. And so, of course, she does go. And going just puts her relationship with her sister in huge jeopardy and her family, like leaving everything behind. And just this fantastical, amazing world with, of course, the queen. And so it's just, oh my gosh, it's just so much magic and wonder, and it's amazing. But then
Mhm.
it has this unique take. Like as you're reading it, you're like, okay, I'm definitely seeing the retelling and the tie-ins to Alice in Wonderland, but then you definitely see some new and really clever, this beautiful, fantastical story of wonder, and then also just, discovering yourself and being yourself without your connection to somebody else. Like connections are really important, but also you've got to be yourself. And so it's fantastic journey.
Mhm. Sounds great. So my next book, I love a good middle grade for upper middle grade readers that has a little bit of romance because I
Okay.
think kids, especially
They're looking for
girls,
that.
they're
Yes.
looking for that. My daughter is 14, so I've just been through this with her for the past few years.
Yes.
And so they want this. They want to know about crushes and what it's like. So my book that I've read a bunch of them and I've had a bunch on the podcast. It's been hard for me to choose. But I want to mention this one. And I don't have the actual physical book because I
Okay.
think my daughter actually stole it, which is
Ah,
great.
yes.
I've been telling her to read it. Anyway, so this is the book for the viewers out there who are actually looking on the screen. It's called All My Best,
Oh, okay.
and it's by Britnee Meiser, and this is her debut novel.
Ooh, neat.
Yes, and so this book actually released at the end of 2024, so I'm breaking the rules a little bit. But
We'll allow it.
she also has a new book coming out in the fall. So
Okay.
that's another reason to mention it. So, and it will be similar, I believe, to this one as far as it being a middle grade appropriate romance.
Yes.
And so this book is about two characters, Emmy and Jack, who
Cool.
are like lifelong friends. But as they're starting high school, so they're a little older, going into ninth grade, starting ninth grade, they're starting to realize that they have some feelings for each other.
Ooh,
But you don't really know what that
right.
middle grade. In these early teenage years,
Right.
it's so hard to know. Does he
Yeah.
really like me? How does it, am I just have this in my head? What do I
Right.
do? It has got all of the angst and the
Nice.
awkwardness of, in fact, a first romance. And so,
Nice.
and the thing I really like about this one is I wouldn't describe it as a rom-com.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of middle grades that are starting to delve into this like romance genre,
Yes.
they're funny and they've got the tropes that your
Yes.
typical rom-coms have, and I do love those. But what
Yes.
struck me about this one was I would describe this as a true middle grade romance, and
Oh, fun.
yeah, and it also, this is interesting. It's dual POV, so
Okay.
two points of view.
Oh, do you
But the
get the both sides of the love
Yes.
interest?
So just
Okay.
like an adult romance, a lot of
Yes.
times you get the perspective from Emmy and from Jack, but it's
Cool.
not done back and forth. So the first half of the book or so is
Oh,
Emmy's perspective of
neat.
what's going on between her and Jack and what exactly is going on and what
Yes.
she's feeling and what she thinks he may or may not be feeling. And then we switch to Jack's POV, and it's from
Ah,
the beginning, it's the same timeline that Emmy just went through. And so you get to see what he's been thinking all along. And
right.
it's so angsty, it's so awkward. It's got that, it's a crush, but it's like a real crush. You
Right.
don't know what's going to happen. You're rooting for them. Um, I'm not going to say much about the outcome because I don't want to give it away.
Of course.
But I will say this. I really hope there's going to be a sequel.
Oh,
And I and
cool.
I and I told Britnee that when I interviewed her, and she feels the same way, but
Cool.
yet we haven't heard any sorts of announcements.
Well, it
But
always, well, I guess not always. Sometimes, a
you
publishing
don't
house
know.
will sign for so many. It often depends on the readers and the reception of the
Yes.
book. So, if
Yes.
we as readers just really love this book and
Hmm.
people are recommending it and buying it, there's a lot more chance of
Yeah.
a sequel. And sometimes those sequels come a little
Yeah.
later. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I do think this book is perfect for kids who want to read about an actual,
Yes.
age appropriate. This is what's really happening with young teens
Right,
when they're
right.
having these crushes, you know? So I loved it, and I would highly recommend it for that crowd.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so I think because of time, we should probably both do one more, and I am
Okay.
having the hardest time picking my one more
Okay.
because I made a list of 16. What
I
if
know.
she picked every single one the same as me? What
I
if
couldn't
Shannon
have
did
picked.
that? It
Yeah,
might have happened.
yeah,
So
I know.
now among that list, I'm having the hardest time deciding. Oh my goodness. So, all right. Picked it out. The Gate, the Girl, and the Dragon by Grace Lynn. And so
Mhm.
years ago, I read her Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, and it is just beautiful. And actually, I listened to that one and I listened to this one as an advance audio. And so beautiful. But then I found out that she illustrates too. And so I had to go back and get the book and see the beautiful illustrations. And so, what is fantastic and unique about this book is that it's got the folklore of China and these stories, and
Mhm.
then these spirits that are still loved and honored and needed by some people today. And then it's also got the modern tie-in. And so it's just this beautiful, beautiful story that it's about. So the gate, let's talk about the gate first in the title. The
Mhm.
stone lion, he's the cub being held by the lioness at the gate. And so the cub is just very playful and all into all the fun in life. And he goes through the other side of the gate. And so two stories are going on one side of the gate and also on the mystical spirit side of the gate. And so the cub meets a girl. And so it's also her story about why she is lost in the world. And then the dragon. There's two dragons featured in this book, but the main one that we learn about is currently in the form of a worm. And if you read books about dragons, which I love, a good dragon story, always the insult if a dragon is throwing insults at each other or somebody else who is not a dragon is insulting a dragon is to call them a worm, right? And so it's neat that this creature is actually currently in the form of a worm. And some of the characters don't even believe, yeah, sure, you're a dragon, little worm, right? But
Mhm.
the dragon is powerful and able to change, but because of what's going on with the gate, the dragon is stuck in worm form. And so it's their story going along, trying to fix the problem with the gate. And it's so beautiful. The adventure is so there. And there are just so many little stories being told that all come together in a beautiful way. And I assumed they would, but like sometimes as I was reading them, I was like, okay, where are we going with this? But lots of little short, beautiful stories. And then everything starts to come together. And it's just fantastic book.
Sounds great. Well, my final book actually is a fantasy. And
Yay.
so, even though fantasy is not my first go-to genre, on the podcast, I like to have, as many different genres
Yeah.
represented as I can.
Yeah, I'm always
And
trying to read across genres and I have to force myself not to read fantasy.
absolutely, absolutely. And this one I really, really loved. And I'm cheating a little bit because it actually doesn't come out until July 1st. I
Okay,
received an advanced copy of this.
beautiful.
It's by Meg Medina, who writes incredible stuff. It's called Graciela in the Abyss. And
Nice.
this is a fantasy about Graciela. She's a sea ghost
Ooh.
and a mortal boy and a dangerous enchanted harpoon. Okay.
A dangerous
And
enchanted what?
harpoon.
Harpoon.
Yes. So there's
Okay.
there's like the thrilling storyline, there's high stakes, everything you would expect in a fantasy.
Right.
But what really drew me in was Meg's writing in this book is stunning.
Nice.
She brings this undersea world where these spirits live, including Graciela,
Yes.
just to life. And it's so interesting. It's so atmospheric. You just feel like you're there and you just want to hear more and more about what this underworld world is like. So it's the
Yes.
world building. With fantasy, we always talk about world building. I loved the world building in this story, this ocean world. It kind of brought out some uh, Little Mermaid vibes. I don't want to like demean it in the sense of
Right.
like it's definitely not a Disney type book, but it's that same kind of thing of a girl she was mortal,
Uh-huh.
she died, and then she came back in the sea, in the ocean as a ghost.
Oh,
And there's also this storyline of her wanting to move up in ranks to different levels of the sea spirits, the sea ghosts.
right.
And there's mentors. I mean, it's just fascinating, the
Neat.
world that Meg has created here. So I would recommend it for anyone, but also if you aren't like the, you know, super high, fantasy
Yes.
type reader, maybe like me, like even though I
Right.
enjoy that, it's just not my go-to. But I did love this book and I would recommend
Beautiful.
this for all types of readers. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Well, that has been so much fun. And like we said, there are so many more books. Like we
Yes.
both could keep
Yes.
going, right?
Yes.
And but I'm sure that then, it would almost have to be monthly and then we'd just talk books all the time. But
I would talk about every book that I have on my podcast. I mean,
right,
I really, they're all different and the authors are all incredible and the books are all incredible.
right? Because we have
And
them on
so,
the
yeah,
podcast because they're incredible. Yeah.
yes, that's right. They are
We don't want
actually,
to
we
talk to a
chose,
guest for 30 minutes about something we didn't love.
right. We choose something that we know we're going to love or that we already love. And so, in a way, your podcast as well as mine, we're essentially recommending books
Yes.
for different types of readers and ages and all of that. So yeah, it was really hard for me to choose, but it was really fun as
Yes.
well to just be able to highlight a few that are all a little bit different that I think could appeal to just a really broad range of readers.
All right. Well, beautiful. Thanks so much, Shannon. It's been fun.
It's been so much fun, Karen, and thank you for inviting me. This is
Yes.
the first time I haven't been just the one asking the questions.
Right?
And
It's fun to
so
be on the other side.
it's a thrill. It's a thrill. And it's so fun to talk to someone else who loves books as much as I
Right?
do and also wants to put those books out into the world via a podcast, via, you know, your YouTube and, just however you're doing it,
Right.
Instagram, website. We all have all of the above.
Right.
And so it's just great to interact with you as well as your listeners and my listeners. So
So fun.
thanks.
I hope that you enjoyed hearing about some of our favorite middle grade books of 2025 so far, and that you have discovered some new books to add to your TBR pile. Something that you could do for Shannon and I now, if you wanted to show us a little love, is go and leave reviews on both the Middle Grade Matters podcast and the Book Huddle podcast. Just leave those on your preferred podcast platform because that really helps more people find our podcasts.